The plan always was to bring that company to a point where somebody would want to write you a check and actually grow it.
Welcome to the Legacy Branding Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Beauparlant, here to guide you through the journey of selling your business and building a personal brand that leaves a lasting impact. On the show, we'll explore real-life founder stories, expert insights, and actionable strategies to help you navigate the transition, avoid post-sale crisis, and create your impact-driven legacy brand. Whether you're thinking of selling, building to sell, or already on the other side, this podcast is your go-to resource for making your next evolution your best one yet. Let's dive in. Today on the Legacy Branding Podcast, I'm excited to welcome Jackie Dinsmore. She is a powerhouse entrepreneur, investor, and legal innovator. Jackie has built and sold multiple businesses, including FlapJackKids, a globally successful children's brand she co-founded with her mom, and Caravel Law, a revolutionary legal firm she co-founded before successfully selling it to a private equity firm in 2023. Now, as co-managing partner of Caravel Law, Jackie continues to shape the firm's impact while also launching Extra Innings Ventures, a VC firm dedicated to funding underrepresented founders with invaluable life experience. Jackie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's awesome.
I always love our conversations. We've known each other for a few years, and so I know a lot of pieces of your story, so I'm excited to have you share some of your insights.
Yeah.
So I'd love to start with, you've built and sold multiple businesses, including FlapJackKids, as I mentioned, and Caravel Law. What has been your biggest takeaway from navigating these multiple exits?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think a lot of entrepreneurs start out wanting to exit, right? And they always say, like, what is your game plan? Do you want to exit? Do you want to continue this forever? And I think my plan was always, I'm probably not the right person to take this for 30 years, especially with a consumer products company. Consumer products company was particularly tough because the more you sell, the more you have to buy. And so you have to have really, really, really deep pockets. So the plan always was to bring that company to a point where somebody would want to write you a check and actually grow it. And so I was very, very fortunate to have done that. And then with Caravel, similarly, I think it was actually started initially by my two co-founders, and they allowed me to join in, which was amazing. And I think the thinking there was we just really wanted to serve a purpose and disrupt and revolutionize the legal industry, which we did. And lucky enough, we got the attention of folks who wanted to buy us. So it's been a wild ride with a game plan that ended up working out.
I love that. So how did you know? It sounds like Caravel Law, like they came to you, but you mentioned that planning that exit more with the consumer products brand. How did you know when the right time was to sell?
Well, we were lucky there too, because they came to us. It actually ended up being bought by somebody that owned one of our factories, and they saw the volume that we were doing. Selling a consumer products company is really, really difficult for people because you've got inventory. And sadly, now that I'm on the investor side of things, investors shy away from consumer product company businesses. So the fact that we were able to sell that, I think I was really proud of that because it is very, very difficult to sell a consumer products company. But I think to your point and to what you do, building a brand is key. And we were able to do that to the point that people recognized it, and anyone could manufacture reversible hats. But we had created a brand that people loved and wanted to jump on board with. And that's what the buyer saw in that. And so he approached us, and the rest is history. We actually sold in 2019, just prior to COVID. So talk about good timing.
Probably, yeah. Sometimes it's all about the timing. Right. Absolutely. Right. So you started that business with your mom, and I've talked to a few people have been in business with family and would love to know what that was like to build a business with your mom, and how did that dynamic influence decisions like selling, and how was that for your mom?
Really good question. I would not advise going into business with family necessarily. Not that it wasn't a good experience. It absolutely was, but you have to be willing to separate church and state, right? If you don't agree on something, it's your mom, it's your dad, it's your husband. My mom and I started it, but the four of us were the main shareholders: my husband, my dad, my mom, and I. And There were some difficult decisions, right, throughout the way. And I think what we ended up doing at the very beginning, which was really smart, is we all had our own lanes and we all made decisions with respect. We would obviously consult with the rest of the group, but at the end of the day, we own that decision. Whether for my dad, it was finance. For the most part, my mom did most of the sales. My husband was chief operator, and then I was the president CEO. So the buck ended with me. But yeah, it was really defining our own lanes and making sure that everybody had their own responsibilities. My mom had survived breast cancer, and that's why she approached me about starting a business with her. And she had been a stay-at-home mom her entire life. So this was her first venture into, she'd done a few part-time jobs here and there, but this was really her first venture into something that grew quite considerably. And she still talks about it today. Love that experience. So despite all the things that happened in terms of us selling it and the success there, I think the biggest reward has been that I got to spend time with my family, and we still talk about the ups and downs of that business and the experience that we had.
Yeah. And I think you said it right. It's defining everybody's role so everyone can stay in their lane as opposed to veering too far
Yeah.
off track.
Yeah, no, exactly. And sometimes it was hard too because my parents they were retired officially, so they had a little bit more time to put into the business. And you hear all this, you hear the word sweat equity all the time, right? It's like, how do you
Yeah.
deal with some of the biggest conflicts I see at the Caravel level between shareholders is, well, I work 60 hours a week and you only work 30 hours a week. And so why am I not getting paid more than you? And sorting that out is really difficult amongst founders sometimes, right? Because it's never going to be equal. So I'm always a big advocate of having some form of agreement about who's supposed to operate and how, so that you can always pull the paper out of the drawer if you need to. Hopefully it stays in the drawer and you never have to. But even amongst family members, I'm a huge advocate of having paperwork. People say, "Oh, well, it's my mom, it's my dad, it's my brother, it's my best friend." That's why you need it more so, because then you can defer to
Oh,
the
yeah.
paper and not emotions and feelings.
Yeah. And good thing you have a lawyer in the family.
I might know a couple.
You might know a couple. But it's true. I think if I think back even in my business, those times where I've like made exceptions for people or like that were family or friends or like did something that was outside of my normal because it was a family or friend, that was when I got myself in trouble because I didn't follow my normal protocol because of the connection.
Yeah. And then you've got a lot of things at risk, right? Because then you've got potentially your business or that decision at risk, but then you've got your relationship at risk. And that's really, really hard. I mean, the number of best friends who are no longer best friends because they went into business together. I always say it's think of it as a marriage. It's almost easier to get out of a marriage than a shareholders agreement or a business, right? It's
Yeah.
something that you have to really take into consideration. If you go into business with a friend, you know that person and you trust them. But I feel there's a lot more at risk than if you go into business with a stranger.
Yeah. And I've seen in my 20 years as an entrepreneur, I've seen many business partnerships implode. And the one I remember the most, it really was that equity piece. Like I'm putting in more than you. I'm spending more time, more energy. You're just riding my coattails. And it didn't seem fair to one party or the other. They had different perceptions of what the other was doing. And they probably didn't have like, this is my lane. This is your lane. And the one business I know that has been very successful and one partner bought out the other one, but they had such a great working relationship. And it was because they had very defined roles in the business.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, 100%, right? But then even when you've got defined roles and then somebody comes along and wants to buy you, what happens if one person wants to sell and the other person doesn't, right?
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? And not to go back to legal and all the paperwork, whatever, but that there's a reason why it exists, right? And so if you decided
Absolutely.
upon that, you just pull the paperwork out of the drawer and you say, well, this is what we agreed upon, or we had a shotgun clause or something like that. It helps put the feelings aside and then it's just business.
Absolutely. Okay, so you sold Caravel Law to private equity in 2023, and you had two partners, and they both exited, and you stayed on as a co-managing director, so or partner. Talk about a bit about that. So obviously, everyone wanted to sell and was okay with selling, and you stayed. So I'd love to know what that experience was like and how your role has shifted, because most founders that I speak to don't end up staying with the business. So I would love that perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So a few things. I think private equity gets a bit of a bad rap, and in some cases rightly so, right? There are some private equity firms out there that really start to turn the screws on a business, and their intent is to really reduce expenses and costs and get it primed and ready to sell again within 5 years, right? They're like house flippers. And so people have this perspective that if I sell to private equity, my life is going to be painful for 3 to 5 years, so that they just end up turning around and flipping us. I was very fortunate because the private equity firm that bought us, they bought three firms in the US, and they bought one in Canada. And they put together this amazing back office support system, which I think a lot of folks can learn from, in the sense of where are most business expenses from, right? Like, it's like a finance team and you have a marketing team. But if you can consolidate that into one overhead for a bunch of multiple businesses, how great is that? That's a way of cutting costs without burn,
Right.
right? And so the private equity firm that bought us did exactly that. We have an incredible, like, robust back office team that assists all of the business with the things, all the businesses that they purchase with all the kind of things that a business needs, but it's centralized. And so that's been a really positive experience, right? Because, and they get to see what other firms are doing. So then they suggest things to us. And so it ends up feeling like one big family, if that makes sense. In terms of me staying, I still think I'm young. I don't know. According to my kids, I'm not. But I feel like I've still got a lot of runway in me. I think retirement for me would be a really, really bad mistake. I think I'd get into a lot of trouble. And I feel like I've got so much more to do. This industry, the legal industry, has been around hundreds and hundreds of years, but it hasn't changed in hundreds of years. And thankfully, to my partners, Joan Robson, they really saw a need to disrupt and revolutionize it. And when we started this business, or when they started this business about 20 years ago, everyone was like, really? Like, this, what is this concept, right? There's all these big firms and they do this, and this is the way law works. And so disrupting an industry that's been a particular way for a really long time is hard. And it takes a bit of time. And now we're like the beautiful swan of the industry, right? There's been a changing of the guard at the company level, where the old GCs who just gave their legal work to people that they golf with is out the door now. Now it's about being strategic and innovative and really thinking about who you use for your legal. It's not about the corner office partner that takes you to the best golf course in the world. And so with this new guard of general counsel coming in and business leaders coming in, they want to do things differently. And so I got really excited about the fact that I could still be along for that ride. We've still got a lot of work to do. And thankfully, hopefully I have another 10 years in front of me to continue that work.
Absolutely. And I totally think you're young. And I hear you on the kid thing too, because our kids are similar ages. You're like, man.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple questions about Caravel Law. So talk to me about, or share, like, what is it about your process that is different? Because I agree that the law industry is ripe for disruption, and I'm so happy that you are doing it. When I work from a branding perspective with law firms, it's like they all look the same. It's like everybody's wearing the dark suit with the crossed arms, with the logo that looks maybe like the scales or something very law-like. The messaging, the photography, it like follows these conventions, and it definitely does nothing to break the stereotype of lawyers being untrustworthy or whatever adjectives you want to find. I would love to shake up the law industry from a branding perspective, because I think the whole space could be disrupted. There's lots of amazing lawyers out there doing amazing things, but when you have a brand that looks like everybody else, you could just get lost in the noise and lumped in with everybody else. Sorry, that was a long-winded question. Let me go back to the original question, which was, what makes what you do different?
Yeah, let's break the stereotype, right? I'm all for it.
Yeah, let's do it. Sorry, I got on my soapbox there for a minute.
Well, let me start with the name. We only had a very, very short time to come up with a new name. You'd be surprised at how many law firms are out there. And like, you want to be able to, as a
Yeah.
branding specialist, you would appreciate picking a name that isn't confusing, not even from a trademark legal perspective, but just from a awareness perspective. So a caravel is one of those ships with all the sails on it from 17th century or whatever. And it navigates small waters. It's nimble. It's that big ships can't navigate. So the thinking is that as Caravel, we're more than a lawyer to our clients. We are along with them in the journey, and we're navigating waters that are unique and different. And being an entrepreneur, right? There's lots of different like hills and valleys you go down. And sometimes your lawyer leaves you at bay. Well, here's your 15-page memo. This is what you can and cannot do. You're off. And I love the idea of Caravel being alongside, right? Being a partner, being practical, being business minded. So I usually say we're different in three big ways compared to big law or traditional law. One, we bring on about 1 in 42 lawyers. So we're really, really, really picky about who we bring on. And we have to be because we haven't been around 200 years. So I believe you're only as good as your people. And the lawyers that we bring on ideally have had that big firm training, but they've either owned a business themselves or they've been in a business themselves or they've worked in a business. And when you've done that, you're more practical, you're more business minded, you're more understanding, you're walking in the shoes of your client, right? And
Yeah,
when I
100%.
worked, I remember my first week working in house at the Toronto Star. I think I wrote like a 15-page memo, and the business people looked at me like I had three heads. They're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Right? Because they didn't want that. They wanted just the answer. They wanted you to walk alongside them, and that light bulb went on. The second way we're different is I don't think anyone, to your point, Laura, cares about like the mahogany paneled boardrooms and the fancy artwork and the big glass leases and the la la la. And I bring my clients to Swiss Chalet. Like, really, at the end of the day, I think they care about the quality of the services you're providing and the feeling of that they're not in it alone. And that's what we really
Yeah.
want to provide to our clients, right? We have an office. It's fine, it's nice, it's cute, but it's not the fancy, right? And I think that's really changing the industry about where does that money go? And we pay our lawyers really well. The way we keep our costs down, we're about 50 to 75% less, or give or take, to some of the traditional law firms. We pay our lawyers well. We've just cut out all that fat because we don't think that fat is necessary at the end of the day. And we don't think our clients care about it. And then the last way I think we're different is we really have decided to embrace technology. I think companies that have decided to ignore that AI and technology is here are going to be left behind. So you have one of two choices. You embrace it, you figure out how it works for your profession, or you get left behind. And so at Caravel, a lot of folks are really scared in the legal industry of technology. We aren't. We've always been forward thinking in that way. We don't use it to replace our people, but we use it as a support and a springboard to help us do a better job and be more cost efficient and effective. So those are the three ways we're
Amazing.
different.
Yeah. My next question was going to be about AI and how you were dealing with that. So you answered that, which I think is great because you're right. It will disrupt a lot of industries. And if you put your head in the sand, even if you don't like it, if you're not figuring out how to leverage it, there's a lot of businesses that will become obsolete. And even for me, I'm in the branding and design world. It's going to disrupt this space very much and already is, which is why I'm creating AI versions of my offerings and I'm leveraging it every day. I'm building out custom GPTs for my clients. I've got a new lead gen tool that's using AI. So I think it's understanding how to leverage it and use it as a tool, but not necessarily as a replacement, but understanding that it is not going anywhere and it will disrupt. So
And I'm going to age myself here, but when I first started as an marketing student, the internet and email was starting to become a big thing. How sad is that? But I remember at the time, I had senior partners say to me, "Oh, well, no, the library is down the hall. You can't search that. Like, you can't search that answer on the internet." Like, and so I think of AI in a similar way. I don't think you can 100% depend on it as absolute truth, right? But it is
mm-hmm.
a springboard, a lifting off point. You still need humans. And I really
Yeah,
believe that you still need humans because they provide a really important thought about the content. But why not leverage these amazing tools that we have at our disposal to make us more effective in our jobs?
absolutely. And I'm seeing it. I just actually created a math tutor in ChatGPT for my son.
Wow. Wow.
Customize it, like where he's struggling, what he needs, what his goals are, as part motivational and part like, let's actually brainstorm on this, not to give him the answers, but to be that extra tutor and tool. And he started using it, was like, Wow, this is
Love
amazing.
that.
Thank you.
Love that. And at Caravel, we have a VP of legal innovation who her main job is just to find tools that work for us. And we're not creating anything proprietary for ourselves. We don't have time for that. But there's so many tools out there, and just her looking into what tools are great. And the fact that as a parent, you're using tools to help your son is incredible, right? And he probably thinks it's really cool. He probably thinks there's a huge cool factor to it rather than having some 75-year-old tutor sitting in your dining room.
He did. Yeah. He was showing me, he's like, look at what it said and look at what it did here. And I'm like, yeah, because I told it to do those things. I'm like, I'm not an expert. I'm still figuring it out. I think the thing with AI and technology is you have to be curious and you have to be willing to try. And it's not necessarily going to work out right the first time, but to be innovative and creative and problem solving at the same time. And that curiosity, I think, is a big
Yeah,
key.
no, I agree 100%.
Yeah. I would love to hear from a legal perspective because you obviously work with a lot of entrepreneurs, different sizes. What are some of the legal pitfalls that you're seeing that entrepreneurs are facing, whether it's selling the business or any other legal aspect when it comes? Are there things that they're missing or things that they should be doing to protect their businesses early on?
Yeah, when I think we talked at the beginning about end game and the game plan, and a lot of entrepreneurs would love to sell their business. And I've actually talked to a couple of entrepreneurs this week even about that. And I think it's like building a house, right? When you build a house, you want the foundation of your house to be secure. And too many entrepreneurs, and it may be their personality, but they start their business on a whim and then they go and take off and they build the plane while they're flying it, which I'm a huge advocate for in some circumstances, but not when it comes to legal. So the number of entrepreneurs who haven't properly incorporated or haven't put their shareholders agreement together or don't have a minute book. And then next thing you know, they're like, well, I'm going to sell. And I have this buyer that just knocked on my door, and the buyer is going to ask for their minute book, right? And I try and explain it's like selling your house with clothes all over your floor. If you don't have a minute book and you don't have your business in order, what does that tell the buyer about the way you operate your business outside of legal, right? It makes you look disorganized and not put together. Same with when you're putting a data room together, you got to put all your commercial contracts in there. If you've just cobbled together a commercial contract for your clients and it hasn't been properly drafted and properly reviewed and it's not professional looking, what does that look like for the rest of your business, right? That's, as an investor, that's one of the first things I look at. Okay, send me the agreement you send to clients, and some of them are absolutely horrific. It's a cobbled together, do it yourself. Oh, I got to press it online and I changed it myself. Spend the $200 to get a proper template. You don't have to use a lawyer every single time you send out that agreement, as long as there's no substantial changes. But spend the few $100 to do the things right from the beginning, so that when you are ready to sell, your house is shining and bright. Looks good.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great advice. And it's got me thinking maybe I need to get my contracts reviewed.
All right, that was not a sales pitch, but
No, no. But it is true that it's like, when was the last time it was reviewed and what changes have been made that maybe wouldn't actually hold up in a court of law, right?
or lawyers or companies that have employees and they've just used the same employment agreement from 20 years ago. Well, that area of law has changed considerably. So it's not to say that you can easily change existing employment agreements, but if you're hiring people under the same employment agreement, why don't you take that opportunity to get your employment agreement updated to what's the latest and greatest, which may be work in your favor, right? So it's all these little things that I know people don't like to spend money and they don't love spending money on lawyers, but build the foundation of your house properly from the get go.
I love it. You build the legal foundation and I build the brand
That,
foundation.
think about a number of people that pick a name and then they never do a proper search of it, and they use that name for a
Yep.
year and then they realize that either somebody else has got it or they get some cease and desist letter because they didn't do the research up front that that brand and that name was appropriate and proper, right?
Yeah. And that's an expensive mistake. Suddenly to have to come back and go, now we need to rename. That is a cost. Rebrand, new visual brand, new all the things. That's an expensive mistake to make that if you had just done it right the first time, yeah, it can prevent a lot. Sometimes people need to make the mistakes though
True.
to learn the
That's true.
lessons. Yeah.
True. Make a mistake on
Yeah.
your first business and fix them all for your second business.
Oh, that's a good piece of advice. I like that one. Okay, so this podcast is called Legacy Branding. So legacy is clearly a big theme. And I feel like what you're creating with Extra Innings Ventures is, for me, and that maybe this is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this feels like this legacy piece for you. You're doing amazing work with Caravel Law, but this feels like there's some heart and soul of Jackie in it. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I am very, very blessed to be on the other side of the table, to have had these exits. I have this gratitude practice every night, and sometimes I just can't believe that I got to where I am. And I got here because of some amazing people that gave me chances along the way, including my co-founders and my family, and even my husband's been incredibly supportive. So Extra Innings was being able to put that gratitude into another business and helping others, right? So if you're a baseball fan, extra innings, when you're in your extra innings in a baseball game, it's do or die, right? And what I noticed along the way, and I didn't have to raise capital too often in my businesses. I was very fortunate in that way. But with FlapJackKids, I initially did start trying to raise capital. And it was really hard. And I was in my 30s. And I remember I went down to Michigan to speak to a big group of angel investors. One of them was one of the early investors in PayPal. And they were a little critical that I was too old, which is so crazy because I was in my 30s and kids at the time. And I thought, is ageism the new thing? Is this what's happening now? Right? Like, what's going on? And I think a lot of the folks just really wanted to invest in the next Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like the 22-year-old kid out of college with the idea, who's a computer scientist, who's super smart. And I'm not saying that 22-year-old kids out of college shouldn't get money. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that the majority of the money goes to them, a lot of them, right? And so where's the money for the people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that have had a lifetime of experience? So if somebody is 45 and they've been in insurance for 20 years and they see a hole in the insurance industry and they go and they start a business to fix that, why wouldn't I invest in that person? They have all the institutional knowledge about the insurance industry. And yes, they're in their extra innings. So a lot of folks would say, oh, are they really in this for the long haul? Or is there a runway here? But if the stats are correct, and I've seen them all over the place, but there was one stat I recently read that the entrepreneurs who are in their later years are actually 3 to 4 times more likely to be successful in their business than someone who doesn't,
I think I saw that too.
right? And it makes
Yeah.
sense. So that's what Extra Innings is about. It's we're fishing in a different pond in the sense that all the investors are over here investing in the youth, which is great and it should continue. But we're over here investing in people who are experienced founders, and then with an extra emphasis on underrepresented founders, whether that be people of color or women or whatever, who tend to get far less capital than men do. So yeah, it's been fun. It's been really interesting and unique and yeah, fulfilling.
Amazing. Are you able to share about any of the companies you've invested in?
So we haven't been around for very long. So we're actually about to do our first investment. So I'm really, really, really excited about that. Funny enough, it was really hard to find portfolio companies that fit our mandate. You wouldn't think, but there's not a lot of companies that are run by founders in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and we're industry agnostic. We just have certain criteria about revenues and things like that, but we really were particular about what we wanted to invest in, and so that has led us to where we are. And hopefully the next podcast I can have say that we have 4 or 5 under our belt, but we've got a number in
Amazing. Well,
process.
amazing. Well, congrats on those. I'm excited to hear more and be able to support you and them as they grow. Thank you, Jackie. This is it's always fun to talk to you, but thank you for sharing your insights. How can people connect with you, learn more about you and Caravel Law, and get those contracts and minute books and all the things that they...
Yeah, absolutely. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm under Jacqueline Dinsmore. You can reach me directly by email, jdinsmore@caravellaw.com, or they can reach out to you. And you've got all my personal info. You know where I live. So
That's not what we're doing here. But I will make sure to put your contact info in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Jackie, always a pleasure. And looking forward to maybe we can have a part 2 and dive deeper into Extra Innings Ventures when you've got some of those ventures under your belt and you can share more about what you've been doing.
Amazing.
There.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, Laura. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for tuning into the Legacy Branding Podcast. I hope today's episode has inspired and empowered you on your journey to building a brand that truly matters. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other founders who you think would benefit from listening. And if you're ready to take the next step in building your legacy brand, visit our website, labcreative.ca, to learn more and book a call. Don't forget to join us next time for more conversations that will help you navigate your transition and create your legacy. Until then, I'm Laura Beauparlant.